Well, let's get started then. Thank you, Jessica and Ramses, for making some time. And I see some of our other friends here. So if any of you want to hop in and add to this conversation, you're very welcome to do so. Oh, Joel just came in, and there's Evo, along with a few others. So the conversation I was hoping that we might have today, and I would really value your perspectives. Jessica, I've kind of watched you as you've entered the tool for thought space, at least in a public way, over the last period of time. And Ramses, you're working with a large number of users, and so it gives you kind of a unique bird's eye view of what people are looking for. But basically, really thinking about the goals that we have as we enter this kind of tool for thought or personal knowledge management space. And maybe I just start with kind of a personal story of, I think it was, I don't know how many years ago, it was more than 10, not as many as 15 years ago. I just can't remember, when I started with Evernote. And I really liked Evernote then. I still like Evernote. I don't actually use it anymore, but I still like it as a product. And I remember being really intrigued by it as a tool for taking notes, and it had this ability to do scanning and archiving and OCR and fast search and tagging. And somehow I just thought, by having Evernote and all these features it offered, that somehow it was going to make me a better note taker and help me to leverage and resurface and use information I captured in a greater way. And it didn't. So it had these features that were cool, but that didn't mean that they were actually going to help me. And when I look back at that experience, I kind of see, at least for myself, I don't know if this is something that others have experienced, but I assumed that these tools were going to guide me to greater enlightenment. And the reality was, just because they had great features didn't exactly mean I was going to be better at accomplishing newer things in life. So that's kind of a starting point for the questions. Is, I think sometimes we get so focused on features and great hopes in what those features will offer. Do we really understand our goals? So I'd be curious, either Jessica or Ramses, if you have some perspective on that. We'll call it the features versus the goals question. Who would like to start?
I can start. I mean, I think there was a little bit of it's always funny, right? We talk about note-taking Twitter. It's this little corner of the internet, or of Twitter. But it seems like every corner of the web has its own drama. And I remember in May of this year, there were many people, they were jumping ship from Rome to Obsidian. And I was genuinely asking, why are so many people jumping ship? Is it just features?
Yeah.
There was a nice discussion. And I was genuinely asking, I'm thinking out loud, why is this happening? Is it just features? And I read some articles from people who were switching, they were exploring Obsidian, but the only thing I really heard about, and still they're valid concerns, but I heard things like data portability. Instead of having your data locked into one system, you have it portable, or I don't know, standard markdown, plugins. And those are all valid concerns, but they're focusing on features. And I think that, like, I believe for a long time that is the wrong discussion, because tools will change. Just look at Evernote. It has changed so much in the last few years as they're trying to salvage the user base that's left. But like, tools change, but I think understanding what it is that you need to get done. Like, I think most of the people in this space are, professional knowledge workers. Like, we're all a little bit geeky about the tools that we use, but I think everyone is geeky in some way, and we just happen to be geeky about the tools that we also use for our work. But then at the same time, we do try to, so we're nerding out about the tools, but then at the same time, we do have things that we need to get done, like on a day-to-day basis. So I think focusing on features or tools is not as useful as focusing on thinking through what needs to be done, and then
Mm-hmm.
looking for the right tool to get it done. Just like I look at knowledge work almost like an art, especially in this day and age. Like the knowledge worker of the past, where you started a role and you would do the same things for like 10, 20 years. I think that time is over. Technology is changing so fast. Organizations are changing so fast. So you always need to adapt, and new tools are coming to the stage. And actually, as you invited me, sorry if I'm going on a rant, but as you have invited me for this space, I was thinking, where else have I seen that the tool was more important than actually the problem we're trying to solve? And that was always in a corporate setting, where we were talking to a vendor like SAP or Oracle, and we would get an amazing deal on some licenses, and then like on a C level, people would sign a contract for like 5 years. We would use some services, but completely having a disregard for the needs of the organization. Like we were doing research. I was working for the global director of recruitment in my last job. We were responsible for 3,000 hires a year, and we were doing like research into what system should we use to minimize the time that we go from initial contact to offer, because especially in our industry there was so much competition that time was of essence. But instead of looking for the right system for the job, we just chose a system and then tried to mold our processes onto that tool, which in the end resulted in a longer time to hire. So I've seen it a few times happen, like complete focus on the tool, like not being able to deliver on your goals. And I think it should be the other way around. Like first you need to have clear what is the problem you're trying to solve, and then what tools are going to help you actually achieve that goal. So yeah, sorry if I was ranting, but it
No,
has been
no.
on my mind for a while.
What's really fascinating about what you said is that basically one of the traps that the corporate world falls into, buy the tool because it's going to make things better, but maybe not have as well defined the problem, is basically repeating with the users now as over the last year or two, as PKM and these tools start to create awareness of knowledge management concepts. We're maybe falling into the same trap. And poor Ramses, I think, a few months back, you made the allusion to the shiny tools, but I think this is what the problem you were referring to, right? Not just the distraction from tools, but putting tools before your objectives.
I think that's the danger if you are focusing on individual features. Like I've definitely stepped into that trap with block references. Like I was so amazed when I finally understood block references and in Rome research and the possibilities of it, that I completely started to mold my workflows around this one particular feature. Now that I'm running into performance issues with Rome Research, and I notice, oh, this particular feature of this tool has become such a core part of my workflow, I'm actually in trouble. So I think if you focus too much on the features and not really focus enough on what is it actually that you're trying to solve, and maybe simplify your workflows a little bit so that regardless of the tool, you can find a way to solve your problem. I think that is way more useful. But it all starts with thinking about the problem, whereas I stepped into the trap of thinking, starting with the feature and then thinking, what can I do with this feature, instead of thinking, okay, this is a problem and like these are the possibilities I can solve this problem with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, now I'm really curious if Jessica agrees with us or does she have a different take on this question?
Uh, this is a really interesting question because I think it comes up over and over again. And before I start, I always like to stir the pot a little bit and address the elephant in the room, right? So I think there are two elephants in the room right now. One is, why are people here? I think, in the past few days, there's been a lot of PKM drama around for
Really?
people who are following. No, really? You didn't notice? So I think part of the curiosity and interest here is that people are wondering, what's my investment? How should I think about PKM? I believe that's question for a lot of people here. And maybe they're a part of it, just, pull up a chair and brought their popcorn. I don't know which camp you fall into. So that's like the first elephant in the room I like to address. And I think the second one is the uncomfortable truth that that Chris and Ramses is talking about, which is I really want a tool to solve my problem, but it really doesn't. It's kind of like during the pandemic, I bought a lot of dumbbells and ab blasters and weights thinking that I'm going to be healthy, but it really doesn't. If I don't have a system, it doesn't really matter what tool you bought or what equipment you bought. So this applies to thinking as well as applies to like the physical world. So I think it just people understand it, but we don't want to accept it because then that means it's harder. The work falls on us, not on the goodness of the tool. So those are the two elephant in the room that I want to start with.
I think you called us out. I think you called us out pretty well there.
I call myself out because I haven't been working out for during the pandemic, and I like to joke about the heaviest thing I lifted is DoorDash deliveries in the past 12 months. So, so where does that take us, and why are we here? Is the question I'm thinking about, and I think the reason why we're seeing a lot of obsession with the tools is because tools are obvious, tools are cool, tools are shiny, right? I can point to my dumbbell, I can point to a tool and say, hey, look at this shiny toy that I have. But systems are invisible. Systems are very powerful and they're invisible. But the better your system works, the less you feel it, right? And so that's how I define a system is if your system's working well, then you shouldn't feel any friction. It should nudge you along and do the knowledge work or the daily work that you want to do. And so the better your system is, the less you talk about it. So it's kind of an opposite direction, where when there's more friction, people talk about their tool more. And when there's less friction and everything is going well with the system, you don't talk about it. So I think that's why there's a lot more spotlight on the tool and less on the system, which is unfortunate, but also important to point out. I'm going to pause for a second. Thoughts so far?
Well, I know, Jessica, that you are a systems-centric person. This is my conclusion from our conversations and following you on Twitter. Do you find yourself as well, though, falling into the shiny object tool feature trap that Ramses and I were discussing?
I'm a huge nerd. So actually, I think in the past 8 months, I've tried all of the tools that I can think of in the market. So I tried Obsidian, I've tried Roam, I've tried Notion, I tried Evernote, I tried Draft, I tried basically everything. Oh, Bear. I was experimenting with a lot of different tools. And I found out that I even started building integration for the tool. So I have integration built for Bear. I have integration that I built for myself that I think some of you may have watched the video where I integrated Notion with Roam with a lot of different tools. So I love these toys, but what I found out is unfortunately I don't want to admit it is that having more toys doesn't help me to get more shit done, and I want to get shit done. So
Yeah.
I have came to the conclusion, I have flipped my approach, and I want to propose this and get your feedback on how this approach is. I flipped my approach. So instead of looking at the tool that I'm playing with, I flip it and I look at the problem that I'm trying to solve. And I have a few signals that I typically use. And Ramses and I talk about this. So I have three signals that I use now to really investigate or understand my system. I look for three signal. The first signal is issue, problem, friction. So I look at my workflow and look at my day-to-day and say, hey, I'm trying to get from A to B. Where am I feeling friction? Where am I feeling bottleneck? And I solve for that. And I look into the tool to see if it can help me to solve for it. And if it doesn't, I switch, right? So it's very much result focused. And the signal that you get there is friction, problem, and bottleneck. So that's the first thing I look at. The second thing I call curiosity led. So I think for a lot of knowledge worker here, just solving problem is a lagging indicator. And for the curious mind, curiosity is another signal that you can chase. So I think it's okay for you to play with tools and say, hey, like, let me look into Obsidian to see if it solves my problem. But you have to be aware that you are led by curiosity and you're just doing discovery work. and don't get sucked into the rabbit hole too much, because it will lead you astray. But if you recognize that you're just playing, you're just being led by curiosity, then that's fine. Just know how to set a stopping point for you so you can go back to work and get shit done.
I
And then the
like that.
third one,
I like that.
the third one I call who do you want to be. So like I don't know if people here knows this, but I actually started to use Twitter because Chris, I think we were in a Twitter space and you're like, Jess, you should try this. And so I jump on the bandwagon and I'm learning a lot about community. And so that's who you want to be. So you can say, hey, I really admire Chris or Ramses or people in the space. That those are the people who I want to be and I want to model after them. And you can approach that as well. And so I think using these three different signals, so first is friction or problem or bottleneck, second is curiosity, and the third is who you want to be, will lead you better towards getting things done instead of being distracted by the tools.
Well, that's a great summary. Thank you for breaking it down so nicely. I love your systematic approach. You just define things so well. I think we're basically on agreement that there is this trap we can fall into with features. And of course, we love features. I mean, Ramses mentioned block references. They are the king. I don't know who doesn't love them. They have a very special purpose. But yeah, in so many, well, in every aspect of life, if we don't have clear objectives or goals, it's very difficult to move forward to achieve something beyond where we're at. And yeah, it's the same with this new generation of tools that we're all playing with. So let's move towards the second question.
Chris, I do want to chime in briefly on
Please
that.
do.
I think Jessica also points it out. It does boil down to a balance, because on the one hand, you need clarity about what you're trying to solve, but sometimes, like, there's some things you can't see until you know it, right? Until you've seen them for the first time. So I do believe, and I've linked to it repeatedly, but I do believe in the network learning model. So on the one hand, you have your day-to-day reality in your work and your work team, often very focused on problems. And then you have, on the complete opposite, you have, for example, social media that just throws ideas your way, especially Twitter, I think. And then in the middle, you need like communities to make sense of all these ideas you encounter on social media. And you need like a little bit of a safe space to discuss your challenges in your day-to-day life. Could be work, could be personal, that you could solve using different ideas that you picked up from social media, for example. And that middle point is basically a community of practice. So you do need some mechanism to get into contact with ideas you haven't encountered before. So social media can be one approach, but then you also need like a sorry to hate, I hate to use the word, but a little bit of an in-group, your personal in-group. you, you can discuss your challenges with. You can discuss your challenges with, and then ask them for their experiences, point to some ideas and how they would apply it if they were in your shoes. Sounds maybe a little bit vague. I really recommend, if you think this is vague, but you find the idea of communities of practice interesting, to look into the network learning model. It's very, very interesting framework to approach knowledge work.
No, it's really smart what you say. Basically, I'm going to call what you just described as mentorship. We don't really know what we don't know, and we need help and guidance so that we can discover tools and techniques. And I'm going to erase the word tools from that list. Techniques, methods, workflows to get things done. Okay, but this is a really great bridge into the next question. Like, what are the factors that then do go into choosing tools? A little bit what you're talking about there, Ramses, is the mentorship that we need to grow. I tweeted earlier about this kind of illustration I heard about a bank. You know, where we put our money requires a lot of trust. And what is it that we're looking for? It can be different things, but usually there's some common things. We want to know our money is safe, that there is some assurance. Years ago, literally it was a physical safe. Today it might be security measures and practices. But we make a choice about where we put our money and what we're trying to accomplish with it. And knowledge management, personal knowledge management, tools for thought are all linked with this investment we're making ourselves and the investment for the future. So that bank, in the Rome world, it's your graph. In the Obsidian world, it's your vault. What are the things that we should be thinking about when choosing tools?
I think there's an important distinction to make, because what you say is that data retention is very important for a tool for thought. But I don't know. It depends really on the timeline that information will be useful. So, for example, one of the ideas in the tools for thought space is algorithms of thought. So you are confronted with a situation, and basically you give yourself a template to think through the problem and come to a decision. Like it will be very interesting to save your decisions and how they pan out. And I think there's definitely merit in it, but the most value is delivered in the moment by having some kind of template with questions to guide your thinking. So in that sense, and I think like this discussion is also going on in the Rome community, and to me, it seems like the Rome team overall is a little bit dismissive of data retention and data portability. Maybe that's just a bad read from my side, but that's how it looks from my point of view. But I think that stems from the fact that they themselves use the tool more for in the moment. So they try to think through problems, and that's how they use the tool. So it's not necessarily about I think, about data retention. Whereas other people may have more the needs that they want to archive decisions and for the long haul, like almost have a feedback mechanism for their algorithms of thought. But I think it really depends on the need. So if you don't have need for data retention, like data portability is probably not on top of your list, and you just want a system that is frictionless and that can help you quickly. And I think that definitely influences what tools you will be using, I think.
So Ramses, I'm a customer. I come to you. I know you have experience. I know you're training. I have some basic ideas of what I want to accomplish. I'm looking to improve my personal creativity. I'm looking to better connect and resurface knowledge. What are the things that you're going to ask me? What are the factors that you're going to help me to think about in making tool choices?
That's a good question. I don't think I have a good answer to it because I've been so focused on Rome research up until now. So I haven't dived into other tools enough. So mostly when people present their use case to me, so I try to guide them through thinking about what are their wanted outcomes. What do they see as like steps that they would need to complete? Maybe not in the right sequence yet, but just what are some things they think they need to do? And then in GTD, in getting things done spirit, think about, okay, what is the first physical action you can take? So not really think through the entire workflow just yet, but just get started with what is the wanted outcome, and then what do you think is the first step you need to take toward that. Like sometimes people come to me and they ask me, like they want to build an entire project management system in Rome. Like it's possible, but maybe it's not the right tool. Like especially if you work with a team for project management, probably a dedicated tool like Asana or ClickUp or whatever tool is probably better. So, but I'm not an expert on in that area, but I will just tell them honestly that their use case is probably not within the strengths of Rome Research. But I'm starting now to look more toward other tools. So I've been really thinking about almost like a workflow to define workflows and then determine, okay, what tool would probably be best given your limitations and your wanted outcomes to first look into. But I'm not yet at that point, I think, personally.
Okay, I like your answer. It's very honest. you've been focused on a specific tool. There's no sin in that, but also having the courage to also say sometimes it's not the right choice. So really, bravo to you. So Jessica, how would you kind of deal with that? You've actually explored the landscape pretty
Yeah.
thoroughly.
So I would let me think. Can I pick on someone? Ramses, could you play with me for a little bit? So the first question I would ask is, why are we here? If anybody come to me and say, "Hey, Jess, like, which tool would you use?" I would say, "Why are we talking about this?" Right? Because the first
Yes.
question I would ask is what brought you here? You could be using this time to do many other things. Like, why are you looking to tools? Is it driven by going back to the framework, right? Is it driven by a pain point that you're trying to solve? Is it driven by curiosity? You're just kind of digging into everybody's talking about it. You want to know what PKM is, or what is it? So that would be my first question
Yeah.
is, why are we here?
Yeah, for me, out of principle, I only work with people who are experiencing pain because I've coached people in the past who are just driven by curiosity and having terrible ADHD. I know completely what it feels like, but it's a dead end, I think, and it's also overwhelming in the long term. Like I spent dozens of hours with people who were completely curiosity driven, but then in the end, we built systems that were never used. So I think is this the best way to spend either of our time? Like for some people, it's just a hobby. So for me personally, I really like to dig into the pain point, and until people can explain their pain point, I think they just should. Maybe they're not ready yet. I know this is very dark. What what I say, like let people suffer, but I think until you find a pain point, you will you will not be ready, I think, to really create a workflow or a solution yet. And I think that is ultimately what we're doing. Maybe we're not coders or programmers, but if you step into the space for tools for thought, for personal knowledge management, you're trying to scratch an itch. And until you scratch an itch, it's just a hobby. But once you start to solve real problems, it becomes serious, I think. And like there are many people who are just interested in learning more from their books. But to be totally honest, from a professional standpoint, I don't work with those people. I did in the past, not anymore, because I think I want to break through to the next level. And unless you're trying to solve a real problem, a real pain point, you will always have this discussion about shiny tools instead of focusing on the problem, I think.
And let me add to that. I think that's my observation too. As much as I wish that, again, just try, sorry, it is not going to sound great, but as much as I want to believe like human are driven by um, curiosity, which I believe people are, we are more driven by pain point. We are the trying to run away from fear, trying to run away from our pain point is a higher driver. And as you can see, better paying customer, I think many people experience this if you run a small business or big business. It's a better driver for putting in the effort than just curiosity led. So I want to acknowledge that. And I think that's why pain point is such a good signal for you if you are looking for a PKM system. Like, what problem are you trying to solve is the first question I would ask. And I know that's not that's not what everybody wants to hear, but that's the truth. So first question for people who are building their PKM system is what problem you're trying to solve, what pain point you're trying to solve, and then go from there and then deploy. I would encourage like exploration at first, right? Whatever speaks to you, because I think different people have different needs for different knowledge management system, and also different knowledge management systems have different ideologies. So I'm just going to list a few. Like some people care about privacy and security, especially I know people working in the medical, pharmaceutical, or if you're dealing with sensitive data, or you're just in Europe where there's a much tighter data security need. That might be your first priority. Then there's data ownership. With the reason, mini drama at the mini corner of PKM, you start to think, well, what if I got kicked out? Do I own my data? Can I port it over? So it might become top of mind for many, whereas it wasn't top of mind for me before. You might care about the community. To be completely honest, at the beginning, I didn't care that much about community because I very much was a like individual contributor from an engineering perspective, and I was like, I can figure this out, right? Like, I like to dig around, I can figure it out. But over time, I'm learning that you can learn so much from other people who already dug into this problem and solve it, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So community is becoming more and more important and essential to me if I'm thinking about scaling and accelerating. So that might be something that you don't think about as a beginner, but you definitely want to think about as you're trying to be like a power user for the tool. And others might be aesthetic. Like some people just like Notion better because they don't like to start with a blank page, or Notion just a prettier template. I think that's a fair reason for a lot of designers and people who are slightly less technical. Maybe they want to choose a tool that has a lower barrier of entry, which might be Notion instead of Roam and Obsidian. So that's my little rant about, you know, what I think you should think about. Going back to your question, Chris, like what are the kind of bullet points that you need to think about when you're choosing your tool? But start with pain point exploration first, but focus on solving your problem. And I think that will move you along faster and more effectively than just poking around looking at the latest shiny new objects.
Yes, by the way, Jessica, I think you point towards something like community that is so important, and also Chris has mentioned it before, how important mentorship is, and probably that is also, I think, one of my choices for choosing a tool, and I've seen it also before. Like my corporate jobs, that the choice for a vendor was also based on how many independent consultants there were. Like SAP often won like bids in the companies I worked for because there were so many independent consultants, there was so much documentation, there were some other tools that might have been a better fit for our specific use case, but were smaller, slower development speed, not a clear roadmap, not really a lot of experts that didn't work for the company. Those were all considerations, and I think for me personally, that has been one of the points that really pained me. Like it caused a lot of pain for me to see that the Rome research team overall is so dismissive of the community, whereas I think, especially as they don't do onboarding themselves, they can't be bothered. And I know it's a deliberate choice from their side because they want to force a certain way of working on people. But then again, at the same time, they're sabotaging their community. And I think the community is so important to learn from each other. Instead of reinventing the wheel, you can better combine the brain power, bring people up to speed, so you can then look for innovations instead of just having people start over and over again, having to figure out things on their own. Sure, it's possible that innovation comes from that because you don't like there definitely have been examples, especially in science, of people not being in the field, learning something independently, especially in mathematics, and then come to unique and correct solutions. But I think, what if we just help each other and then combined our brain power and look for solutions to common problems? Because even though we work in different roles, even though we work in different industries, there are so many overlapping challenges we work with, like information overwhelm. How do you work with distributed teams? There are just common themes that we can learn from each other and then learn best practices. Just look at Rome Book Club. It's an example or a case study in how do you build a collaborative graph. And I just wish that Rome and some other vendors would promote that idea a little bit more and more appreciate the community and what comes out of it. I think Obsidian is one really good example of appreciating their community and the ideas that come from it.
All right, so at this point, I want to summarize a little bit some of the factors that the two of you brought up, and I have a couple questions for you related to that. But before I do that, I just want to mention to the others listening here, the third question we're going to consider is there an easy path to PKM? Easy path to personal knowledge management?
No.
Yeah, I think the answer is obvious, but I just want to put that out there. If any of you want to join in as speakers for that third question we'll consider in a few minutes, please send me a speaker invite. I see Matt is here. I see Joel is here. Joel, Max, Chetachi. And I'm sure there's a few others I'm missing as I scroll through the list here, but send me a speaker invite if you want to jump in on that question. Is there an easy path to PKM? Okay, so in summary, some of the important factors that you've brought up that maybe we see is defining data ownership, portability, security. That might be important to some people, not important to some people. Roam is well known for its multi-user capability. Obsidian is not a multi-user tool. Logseek is not a multi-user tool, basically based on their current shape. We've mentioned community and mentorship, getting assistance. Let me ask you now about two other things that kind of come to my mind. Is it important that these tools have a stated vision? And how important is the people behind the tool? Or is that not so important? For example, who are the people behind Microsoft Word, a tool that many of us use every day? Do we even think about who the programmers are, or we use a lot of tools, but we don't really have any connection with those. So how would you answer that? Does product vision come into making a choice, and the people behind the tool, does that come into making the choice?
Oh man, I really want to hear everybody's thought on this because that great question. That was the question that I've been thinking about in this past few days because um, for my purpose of use, if I can be super honest here, Roam to me is still, for my brain, the best tool in the market, hands down. Like I try to switch and I just can't help but being pulled back just because I think in outliners and I like a lot of things in Roam. However, here's the question I'm thinking about. I often feel like I am putting my most important asset on borrowed ground. What I mean by that is that I think knowledge in our brain is our most important asset. And Rome not having data ownership, not having a clear roadmap for security measure, and then seeing that important like people I really respect and really enjoy talking with are leaving the community is a scary warning sign for me. And I think that's why this question is worth exploring. Um, and how important is it for the people behind the tool? So I think there's a lot of genius that went into the tool that is Rome today. But looking forward, I worry that without a community support, without honest feedback, and without um, people feeling safe to voice their needs, that we're going to see a crossover point at the near future where the growth for Rome, the current tool, start to slow, and you see a lot of other tools catching up. So that's my main concern right now. Even though at this point, Rome to me, it's still the tool that fits my brain the best. I know I didn't quite answer the question, but that's a problem that I'm thinking through right now.
So basically, it's something you're exploring personally right now, whether these things are important to you. Basically, a little bit of, do you feel comfortable with the bank that you're currently using?
That's right. And then also there are other stuff that I didn't think it was important, which is really interesting. I didn't think it was important. That's becoming more and more important is the size of my brain on the tool grow, which is speed. I had to move some of my capture workflow into Notion and build API myself to my phone because Roam just does not do that very well right now. And so I had to build my own tool outside of it. And as more and more of those knowledge activity grow outside the Rome, it really makes you start to question what's next. So that's also the question I'm thinking through right now.
Okay, I don't think you're alone. Ramses, how would you build on that discussion of product vision and people behind the product?
Yeah, I think they are intertwined. So I think it's always good to start with a vision like Rome has, although I don't feel like the Rome team overall has been good at communicating their vision. So I think that the best way to communicate your vision is just by shipping features or at least a product. But I think the vision also should be connected to how you treat your user base. So I think it does really it is really important how like what personality the people have behind the product. So if you're very closed off, if you um, are not in touch with your customers, or maybe some departments of your company are in contact with customers, but it doesn't trickle to the development team, that is a problem. I've definitely worked in companies where the customer success team support were in really great contact with the customer base, but like their issues were not really given priority. So there was like a stop between the communication with the user base. So I think that can be a problem, especially when you're too rigidly pursuing a vision you have without looking out for your current user base. And I think just especially in this time of agile companies, of lean companies, we should listen to users, how they use the product, because um, you may be like you as a team may use your own tool, but that is a very narrow use case. And if you want to survive as a tool, you should listen to your user base, how they use the tool, and what limitations they run into. And again, sorry to come back to Rome Research, but I feel like there's a little bit of a disconnect there, where part of their company is really in touch with the community, especially like the support team, Matt, Clara. They're very on the ball, but then the engineering team seems to have their own agenda and listen um, to the user base intermittently, but then they go into periods of being reclusives and only work on their vision. So I think finding that balance is really tricky. But and like you shouldn't just go by the whims of your user base, because I've seen that as well in my work, where we just went anytime more than two customers were complaining, we would shift our focus to make those customers happy, and then we would we would suffer on our long term goals. So you really it's tricky, but I think it's both necessary. But and get being in touch with your user base, it really boils down, I think, to personality of the team behind the product, which is very difficult. But that's also maybe this is because I come from an HR world. I just believe in culture, how important company culture is, and shaping it, and maybe inviting some controversial thoughts into your team to balance things out can cause some friction, but I think that makes things happen.
So
Can
let
I
me
add?
propose.
Oh,
Please go ahead, Jessica. Sorry.
I want to add like two thoughts. One is about the vision and one is just about culture. So culture is something I'm easing into. I'm still I'm the type of student when I was in school, I hate group classes. I hate group projects because I feel like I can do more myself than being in a team of four. So I'm really learning about the community here and how useful it is and how helpful it is to be welcome into a community. So I just want to put that out there. I don't not being a community person in the beginning, I'm really learning a lot from this community. The second thing I think is really interesting about vision or product vision is um, sometimes I look at Rome and I'm frustrated about not having data ownership and privacy. But really interestingly, the roadmap or vision that has been laid out is collective intelligence, right? And so I could understand why Rome, like security and data ownership, is not the first priority if your vision is collective intelligence, right? So understanding the roadmap and the vision for the founder, I think it's really important. And I'm just kind of going through, I was doing some Googling. So I think for Rome, it's collective intelligence. For Notion, it's organize your work. I just Googled the slogan. For Obsidian, I think it's everything is connected. And then for app like Bear, it's focus, flexible writing app, right? So if you look at their slogan, you really get a good sense of what they're aiming for. But what I find really interesting in Notion is that, yes, Notion has been used for a lot of the small, medium sized businesses to organize their teamwork. Their Kanban board is quite amazing. Obsidian, everything is connected. You see that in the brain graph. Rome has been really interesting to me because collective intelligence I can be really on board about, because I think that is amazing if we can do that. But we're not, but Roman's not really, I'm not seeing a collective because they're not really friendly to their community. So like, where's the collective? If you're kicking people out, where's the community? And then I don't also am starting to not see intelligence, because if you're kicking people out and you're censoring people and you're not letting people to voice and have like discussion and disagree, then there's no intelligence. So I'm really interested in seeing Rome's investment and kind of review of their vision. If your goal is really collective intelligence, you have to invest in your community and you have to invest in people who are saying something different that you may not want to hear. And that's what I would love to see like going forward.
Well, those are some strong thoughts that the both of you brought out. Yeah, it's difficult to hear very loyal customers and users and advocates being so frustrated. I mean, I'm the originator of Rome 42. Spent a lot of time, so I know where you're all coming from. But okay, let me just add a little bit to this factors that go into choosing tools for thought. A year ago, I would have never said that community was important, which is, I think, what Jessica was saying a minute ago. And Ramses always has known that, just that's his background. But community is an important factor. And something else that I want to add is I'll call it partnership. I think that this space for tools for thought and personal knowledge management will have been around for really decades. We're just getting to a point where there's this mass movement in this direction. What we want is partnership with these companies. They're building tools. They don't know everything yet. They're not sure how to solve certain problems. And we're okay with that. But we want to be partners with them. They can't figure it out by themselves. And that's personally what I'm looking for. And I'm going to make a comparison of a company that I think is doing fabulous with partnership. Normally, I would talk about Obsidian, but I'm not going to. In this case, it's Readwise. Now, Ramses has been a long time
Yes.
Readwise user, and I could shoot myself for not listening to him early last year. This company is, I'll call it the secret silent competitor of all these tools. What they're building is some amazing tools for thought that are going to eliminate some of the things that we're doing in Rome or Obsidian today. They're basically creating this whole pipeline from the entry point of knowledge into our system to how we resurface it and reconnect it later. It's really brilliant. And I'm in their reader beta, which everybody wants to get into. I begged and pleaded like everybody else. Somehow I edged in. And their process is wonderful. They don't just give you the tool. They do a 15-minute onboarding. I was on the line with Aaron, who is their marketing person and one of their co-founders, and it was just a normal, friendly conversation. It was just so easygoing. And they're planning to build out some community interactions. So I'm beta testing that with them. It's so approachable. And what I love about them is they love reading and they love utilizing what they read. They are passionate about their product and you're talking to experts. So if I challenge them on something, I'm likely to be wrong and I love it. I'm wrong, but I learned. Or if I am right, they're humble enough to say, okay, we're going to add that to the list, or we've been thinking about that. Thank you. It's partnership. It's partnership in the product.
And when you're wrong, they're friendly about it, like instead of crushing you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been so to say bullish on Readwise for I don't know, like 2.5 years, just shortly after they launched. And in the beginning, I really treated them as an integration tool. Like I come from a integration background, stringing different tools together, and like the way they listen to feedback have been always it's incredible. Uh, like they don't let their ego get in the way. They will point out when you're wrong, but in a very friendly way by just saying, "Hey, thanks for your question. Just do this." And oh, wait, we've already written an entire article about your question. Here it is. Just very friendly, very approachable, and yeah, and I think very responsive overall to people who are actually using their product. And obviously, they started out scratching their own itch, especially Dan. like one of the co-founders, then he really wanted to better retain what he was reading. I don't know, he has like hundreds of thousands of highlights currently in his Readwise database. So he is using the tool himself. He's running into things, but then he's also actively talking to other people using the tool for different purposes. So there's this feedback going on the whole time where they are learning and they are teaching people, and then they are learning also from their teaching, because when things are not clear, they will figure out, okay, how can we make this easier for people to find the answer to these questions? Because if we get these questions repeatedly, obviously we're doing something wrong. So instead of blaming the user, which sometimes happens, like, how can you be so stupid not knowing this? It's more like, okay, we have not made this easy enough to understand or easy enough to find the answer to this question. So to help ourselves, we will help you. So it's a two-way street. I really love it, how they approach it.
Yes, and that's so the word I'm constantly in my mind using there is partnership. I'm not
100%,
I'm not an
100%.
employee, but I feel like a part of the family a little bit, like the little nephew playing in the backyard, but I'm welcome. And so it's a very nice way of interacting and shaping and nudging them in a useful direction. So partnership, I think, is something I'm looking for in these personal knowledge management tools. All right, so I'd like to move into this last question, which seems obvious, and this is where I'd like to open it up. I would love to hear from some of the others. Is there an easy path to personal knowledge management? We talked about being goal-centric before putting tools and features first. We talked about some of the important factors that you should bring into mind, but is there an easy path? So I don't know, Maggie, I saw that you joined. Joel, I don't know if you're in a position to jump in. Joel, just send a speaker request and we'll add you to that. Jessica, you want to get us started? Is there an easy path? We've watched your path and journey on Twitter.
I'm thinking, I don't think it's easy, but it's worth it, and you can make it enjoyable. If it's easy, everybody would do it, right? But I think it's a worthy pursuit to look for first at your system, your workflow, and then basically tease out the friction and pain point, and you can make this enjoyable, still effective. I don't know if I would ever say easy, unfortunately.
No, I would agree with you. Ramses, you've helped a lot of people. Is there an easy path?
No. That's why, like, I've been hunting for this holy grail of the workflow to define workflows. I haven't figured it out yet. I've done, I think, close to 80 one-on-one interviews, onboardings with RoamSec members, trying to understand their challenges. It sounds like everyone is more or less struggling with the same issue. It's not really about tools, but it's about gaining clarity about the problems they're trying to solve, the steps that they need to take to solve it. And I believe it's a discovery process. So that is also why I'm so adamant about the importance of community when it comes to knowledge work, personal knowledge management, tools for thought, thinking through problems, or just, I don't know, archiving insights. It all boils down to, okay, what have I experienced? What are my lessons learned? How can I record wisdom for my future self? Because I'm really with David Allen when it comes to your mind is, or your brain is for having ideas, not storing them. So I think we're really bad at that. So we do need systems, but then everyone has a little bit of a different way of thinking, has different intuitions. I think that is why tools like graph tools like Obsidian and Roam are so useful, because they function more or less like how our brain works. So you have little clusters of information that you can link together. I think that is very useful. But apart from that, we all need to create our own connections, because we have unique clusters in our first brains, in our biological brains. And likewise, we will probably create unique clusters and unique insights, and we all have unique language that we use to describe ideas and how they relate to our context. So it's not easy. I think we can learn from each other when it comes to process. So just like when you're a writer, like the writing process is messy, but there are stages where you can go, where you can progress through, like brainstorming, outlining, doing research, stuff like that. Recombining your notes. So yes, we can learn from each other, but then in the end, we all have our unique processes, I think.
Well, Ramses, we're really indebted to you in the community for helping out people so much, and for taking a few bullets in the last week or two. We have Joel here too, who is, I have to say, Joel, one of my favorite things about Joel is the interview I saw with him and Robert Haysfield. I think it's well over a year ago now. Just amazing. It's on YouTube. It's well worth watching if you haven't seen it. Joel, welcome.
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, this is an awesome conversation. I just want to amplify what Ramses is saying about the personal aspect of PKM. I think that's why there's not really a smooth, easy path, because there's not like a cookie cutter solution that you can sort of adopt and have it be ready to go. You can make it easier, but I think like something that's helpful to have is like a sense of the general range of timescales it takes to find something that works. And I think like everyone on this call sort of has been through different phases of their journey, and they all are part of what it means to develop a PKM system. And a lot of it also is hard because it's personal in the sense that the system includes your own personality and your own struggles and your emotions. And why are you having trouble getting tasks done? Is it because you don't have the right tagging system, or is it something to do with the way that you think about your goals? And that's harder to fix than changing the tagging system. And so I think those are all aspects that make it, I would say, it's unrealistic to think on the time scale of weeks, maybe even months. And that doesn't mean that there aren't changes, but I think having a sense of like a growth journey as a trajectory makes a lot of sense to me. And when I talk to my students, like I emphasize that it takes time. That doesn't mean like it has to feel like a slog. That doesn't mean like it feels like impossible, but it takes time, just like any aspect of personal growth. And so I really appreciate Ramses talking about the personal aspect of PKM is, I think, underappreciated. Courses notwithstanding, right? We can learn from each other, and we can sort of get a better menu of starting options. But ultimately, I think we sort of always have to personalize our PKM. That takes time.
Joel, you mentioned that we can't really put this into weeks, maybe months. You've been on this journey for a long time. Do you find the journey joyful, or are you exhausted from it?
I find it joyful. As long as you don't hold each piece too hard, too tightly. Even you can hedge your bets a little bit without, avoiding committing to a tool. Like with Rome, being mindful of how much you're using block references versus page references, and the trade-offs of how hard it will be to, export your data. And Rome does have mechanisms for getting in and out, but it's not perfect. But you can change parts of your workflow, and it's exhilarating to have like each little piece, each tool adding new insights to your system and helping you to grow. I don't find it drudgerous. Is that a word? That's not drudgery.
It is, and what you said there, Joel, is basically what I was thinking myself. That it's a joyful journey if you embrace the concept that it is a journey. There is no short path there, and I don't know if now that I know what I know, I don't think I'd want it to be short, because there's so much growth and it takes time for things to sink in and build and iterate. But then you see those improvements over time. It's really a very pleasant experience. Thank you, Joel. Alan, you wanted to speak up.
Yes, thanks for having me. I'm really glad you're having this conversation. There were just a couple points that you brought up, and thought I'd throw my hat in the ring. I'm kind of on the sidelines of the community, but I'm a really, I'd say, deep user of a lot of these different tools. Have been using Roam for a while. I still use it for work, even though ironically that's the last possible place that it will work in the long term, because if it was going to work and at work, it would have to go through so many firewalls and permissions, and that's just not going to happen. I also use Obsidian, Logsec, Craft, drafts, etc. It's a hellscape in a sense of I almost feel like I have to take whatever I've found or I'm working on and kind of like apply it to all these different tools. But that's the first point I wanted to bring up is I haven't heard that discussed yet, but I found it to be at least somewhat of a security blanket to embrace using multiple tools. I heard earlier about use Notion for this and Roam for that, and I totally agree. And Readwise is fantastic, and both Readwise and Instapaper, Up Next, and even Drafts I use in various ways because this leads to the question of like, how do you take this journey? I think it's important to have a kind of a seed bed that can sometimes be different than your primary knowledge management home. And that way you can kind of skip around, try things out, experiment without losing at least that one part, let's say what you glean from social media. And they all have their own advantages. So I wanted to throw that in as a tip that I found helpful. It just takes some pressure off. And then the other thing is that the community here is something that I've really never experienced in other places. It's really fantastic. And I wonder if this conversation could be formalized somewhat, because it can be intimidating to look at all the products that are out there and try and understand the personalities behind them and their trajectories. But if you actually look at the tools as a collection of affordances, then there is a lot of overlap, and those affordances can be identified. For example, Rome's use of transclusion plus outliner is sort of like a combo affordance that creates a wellspring of, advantages. But that can be boiled down. And in the same way that Logsec does something very similar, that can be boiled down. And so rather than using it to attack a series of products, we can almost just make a recipe. Hey, this is exactly what we're looking for. These parts Readwise, these parts Obsidian. So if anyone's interested in a kind of a 95 theses, I've worked on some of it together and love to work with others. That's about it.
Alan, those were some really great thoughts. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, having a broad perspective of what some of these different tools do and harvesting the best ideas and seeing how they relate. It goes back to what Ramses was talking about earlier about workflows. Those should transcend products, even though there's specific details and community. Thank you for speaking up. Before we get to Maggie here, I see that Chetachi. Am I saying your name right? Chetachi.
Yes, that's perfect.
First off, you are the theme creator for Obsidian, right? Ying Yang?
Yes.
Hey, I just got to praise your work here. Install Ying Yang on Obsidian.
Thank you. Love it. Thank you so much. Love that theme.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you like it.
Welcome. What would you like to add?
Well, I think just from listening to the other speakers, and I guess to answer the question, for me, I think that getting into a personal knowledge management system can be easy for some people, but probably not easy for most. I think that because a knowledge management system is like primarily based on the way that you think, it sort of has like an intimacy in that way. And I think that for some people are very architecturally driven and they can get into a product fairly easily because they understand themselves in that way. And I know for my little sister, like she's very young and she's a high school student. So she had the goal of creating a system just to manage her high school studies. And because she has a very architectural brain, she chose a product like Notion. And she has an entire system built out in Notion, and it just works perfectly for her. So for someone like her, creating that system was like a breeze for her. it was fairly easy for her to build something around her brain because she understood herself. But I guess for like somebody like me, I'm much more indecisive, and I have a harder time understanding myself and how I use these products. So for me, it's going to take a little bit longer, and that brunt work might be a little bit more gritty. But I think that it it does have something to do with that intimacy that you feel when you're using a product. And because of that, it can be easy for some and maybe a little bit harder for others. And I'm glad that Alan brought up the multi-tool use, because I think that for a lot of people in this space, we're kind of like discouraged to using multiple tools, and many people say that you should just stick to one and stop app hopping or whatever it's called. But I'm glad that you brought that up, Alan, that we should embrace using other tools and exploring different tools, because for a lot of us, and for speaking for myself, like sometimes you don't really understand the full scope of what a tool can do for you until you actually use it through and through. So, yeah, I think that was really great for you to have brought up, Alan.
I like what you said there about it, it's so intimate. Joel was using the word, putting your heart into it. You're using Obsidian. I'm kind of curious. Did you start with Obsidian, or did you come to Obsidian from something else?
So I started with Notion. I wanted to use Notion as a task and project manager, sorry, and also a personal knowledge management system. But in using it for about, I think I used it for 3 to 4 months, I realized that the project management was fine. I was okay with that. The system that I built in it for that was working for me, but the personal knowledge management was not working at all. So I wanted to explore different applications, and I tried Roam for about a week. And I don't know what it was in me using Roam, but I didn't really feel like my brain was working the way that Roam is supposed to work. So then I started using Obsidian, and I realized that Obsidian, like my brain works the way that Obsidian works.
What was it about Obsidian that made it work for you?
I think it was mostly the fact that all of your files are owned by you. Nobody else it has access to what you write. And I was doing a lot of daily journaling in Notion. And I came to a realization that I don't really own my words. I don't really own my files. And then I started using Roam, and I realized that that was the same problem, but I didn't realize that that was the problem that I was having. And then when I started using Obsidian, I could feel myself owning my files more and more. And it made me just love this application.
Same.
Yeah, with what you're saying, if you feel a hesitation because of concern about your data, it prevents you from writing when you need to be writing.
Yes. And it's funny because I did not realize that that was the problem I was having with Notion and Roam. I just thought that like, oh my goodness, like these apps don't work for me. I don't know what's wrong with me. But like when I started using Obsidian, I realized that that was my issue. That was my problem. I need ownership over my words. And that's why I'm really glad that Alan brought that up, because if I would have stuck with the mindset of, stick with an application, just use it for like 6 months to a year or something, you're just going to find yourself using it or whatever, I probably wouldn't have even found Obsidian. I probably wouldn't have even, tried these other applications out to see what would actually work for me.
Oh, that's an interesting journey. Thank you so much for your theme work. It's awesome. I used Obsidian for a few months, and then I installed your theme, and I said to myself, maybe I could stick with Obsidian because of this theme. So your work is so good.
Love it.
It's
I
true.
love it so much, and it's so interesting.
Thank you for
It's obvious you come from Notion. It has I love the aesthetics. It's so in balance. Thank you. Yin yang for sure.
Thank you so much, guys.
So we also have with us here Maggie, who we adore, and she's leading currently the Rome Book Club #6, which I didn't have time for, but I wish I had. Maggie, what's your contribution to this? Is PKM easy in conversation?
Well, it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently because I've actually had a couple students, usually like undergraduate students or, just starting grad school saying, hey, I know you're into this PKM thing. Like, what should I do? Where should I start? And my thought is, oh, wow, like there isn't, the thing that we could do better is have sort of easy entry points or access points, because I think in Rome Book Club, we're talking a lot about, these 2 books. So How to Take Smart Notes by Sanka Arens, and then How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler and Charles Van Doren. And I think actually those are 2 really great books that are good entry points to think about the concepts behind a lot of PKM, but they're not necessarily great access points to think about how to actually implement them in tools. So I'm really trying to actually build entry points into our Rome Book Club graph, and then also thinking about how can we build these kinds of entry points just in general to say, oh, hey, like I'm a student, this is the kind of work I'm interested in doing. It's like, okay, here's kind of like where you can start. I think that's one thing that we can do to make things a lot easier. And I think other people have also mentioned that, but that's definitely something I've been thinking a lot about. The other thing I wanted to mention was I was in a faculty success program things like a development for junior faculty recently. And one of the things they talk about is a lot of times when we're coming up with a problem, we tend to kind of make assumptions about what we need to fix that problem. And in PKM, I think a lot of the assumption is, oh, I just need the right tool for this thing. And that's why there's a lot of discussion about like, oh, like, do people changing apps? And like, sometimes that's the right decision, but then maybe sometimes you're just changing an app, but there's something else going on. And so the framework that I want to share with people in case they find it helpful is that this program that I was in basically said that you can kind of conceptualize getting unstuck in 3 different ways. And so the first way is identifying if you have like what they call technical errors. So that's basically like, you're really overwhelmed and maybe the answer is you need to learn time boxing, and that will help you manage your time. And that's a technical error. It's like, oh, you just don't know about a feature in the note-taking app that you're using. And I think a lot of times when we try to help people with PKM-related things, it's a lot of it, we're approaching it from the technical error point of view. Like, if only you knew about this feature, then you could do this thing. Or even if only you knew about this concept, then you could do this thing. So that's the technical errors. The second one is psychological blocks. And I think for a lot of people, this is actually where the issues come in. So, you've set up your perfect writing workflow, but then you sit down to do it and you just can't get started. And your brain is running with all these different ideas, or you have to get up to the bathroom. And so kind of the idea with the psychological blocks is that maybe there's something deeper that's preventing you. It's not that you don't have the right tools and techniques, but you have to deal with perfectionism or imposter syndrome or fear of failure or any of these other blocks. Or maybe you just don't know why you're doing something. You need to connect to some sort of deeper meaning. So I think we don't necessarily talk enough about those aspects that might be kind of preventing people from getting where they want to go. And then the third one is external realities, which is basically maybe there just isn't the answer to the question that you were trying to solve. Maybe there's no tool yet that can do what you're trying to do. Or maybe you're exhausted because we're still in the middle of a pandemic. So kind of with the external realities, there's not really much to do about them besides say, okay, this is life and this is how it is for me now. And by accepting this, I can make alternative arrangements or do something else. And I think with a lot of tool creators, maybe that adjusting an external reality is saying, oh, maybe I'm going to build this workflow or like build a new plugin or whatever it is. So the framework, technical errors, psychological blocks, and external realities. I found it really helpful for myself to think about, okay, is what I really need like to tweak my workflow, or is what I need to like put my butt in the chair and work on the problem I'm trying to solve?
Maggie, I'm sure you're getting a chance to practice all these with the Rome Book Club, guiding and helping people as they explore some of these new things that come up with the community. Maggie, I want to ask you a specific question. this was something I wanted to mention earlier, but I'm glad that you popped in because you're kind of a good example with something that maybe you didn't know, and that's about showing respect towards people and the different tools they use. I noticed that you're a Roam user, you're reading the book club, leading the book club right now, but you're also an Obsidian user and probably other tools. And I've just always felt that you've been compassionate and sympathetic for different people's needs. Do you see that about yourself? What drives that respect?
Yeah, that's something that I've been thinking a little bit about. And actually, in book club recently, we've been talking about inspectional reading, which is basically skimming, which is kind of trying to understand the gist of the book. And in the last book club, we talked about analytical reading, which is basically trying to really understand an argument that an author is trying to make. And kind of in part of that, we get into a lot of thinking about, like, you know, why am I reading these things, or like, why am I using these tools? What I want to get out of them, and, you know, am I trying to make an argument, or am I trying to just understand another person's point of view? And I haven't read this book, but I did read the book review of it, that there's this book called The Scout Mindset, which basically is by Julia Galef, who founded CFAR, the Center for Applied Rationality. Anyway, I don't necessarily identify as a rationalist, but a lot of what she talked about with her framework does resonate with me, which is that I think I'm less interested in defending one side or like pushing for one mission, and like more interested in understanding, understanding tools, understanding people, helping people, meeting them where they're at. And so although I have like my own values, I think those values are not really tied to a tool that we're using. It's more tied to treating people with respect, I guess.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I think that's an important lesson for others of us. I'm like, just a little bit connected with what Ramsey said earlier about being kind of connected to Rome. For me personally, actually, I should disconnect myself from Ramsey's, at least for this statement, that become a little narrow in my focus and thinking, because I liked the tool so much and the technology. But as I've expanded, looking at other tools, like going into Obsidian, it's a lot of the same things are being accomplished at the end, but the path is so different and feels so different. But you have to respect the different ways of thinking. So I've really appreciated that.
No need to distance yourself
yeah.
with that comment. I completely agree with you.
Oh, yeah. Well, the reason I asked this question about being no easy path, I've personally seen for myself that there isn't. And there's a choice that has to be made here. I'm going to invest in myself, which is going to be time, probably money, lots of learning, but there's kind of this long-term growth possibility. And for some of us that have been in this space for a little while now, we kind of have to be like the big brother, the big sister, the adult. When somebody gets started, they don't really know what they're getting into. They're buying a tool, and they're thinking the tool is going to make them smarter. The tool is going to make them more creative. And it's just a tool in the toolbox. And we just need to know that they need to be guided step by step, a little bit of hand holding. And it really pays off. Like with Rome 42, one of the things that I saw is a lot of users would come in and they don't know how to install extensions. They don't ever want to program or build smart blocks. And there's an interesting example. One user that came about, I don't know how long ago, maybe it was about 8 months ago, very non-technical, very intimidated by Rome technology. And today I see that she's involved in writing smart blocks documentation, this totally technical thing, so people can grow. So encourage people, just knowing that it's going to be a longer journey than what they thought, but the journey is so enjoyable and pleasant.
I think you speak to something so important. Again, mentorship, it's a double-edged sword. So mentorship helps new people in, but then when there's a culture of mentorship, they are encouraged to help other people if they're just like 1 or 2 steps ahead of some newcomers. And being a teacher myself, working with like 40 student classes, way overwhelmed, I really started to rely on like co-learning, forming little groups of students, like they could self-organize, but having little groups of students. I was teaching Spanish, so obviously it's difficult when non-native speakers practice with non-native speakers, or like beginner, like people at the same level. But still, it helped when they were explaining stuff to each other, and I've noticed the same thing a few times in my life. So first of all, I'm not a Spanish speaker. I started learning Spanish when I was 21. And I actually graduated with a degree from a Spanish university, and taught Spanish for a few years. And that was all made possible because of Anki, this flashcard program. And there's a similar community around language learning, about Anki, flashcard programs in general, just the same way like there's for the note-taking community. I've experienced the same thing when I pivoted in my career, went from a commercial role to a more technical role, and I had to learn R, the data / programming language, R and R Studio. There was a similar open community where people who were just a few steps ahead were helping people new to the community. So I really believe in this, and it takes a specific person, like a specific personality, to be willing to to have the patience and to help new people on their path. But I really think if once the idea lands with you, that when you explain something to other people, you yourself will learn it better. I think then more people are willing to help other people. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little bit ranting, but I've just seen this so many times work out in a positive sense. I just keep repeating this idea because I just believe in it so much.
Well, and we've seen it many times. The mentee becomes the mentor, even when they don't think it's going to be possible for them. They absolutely have. Well, I really appreciate the conversation. We've been going an hour and a half now. You all helped me very much with kind of considering this topic about aligning goals as we make choices in tools. I think Joel and Chetachi, your thought about doing so with heart, because it's such an intimate thing, that really resonates with me. Alan, appreciate what you said about learning from using multiple tools, try to have a broader perspective. Maggie, I think you're a role model for showing respect and dignifying people in the way they use tools. Ramses, thank you for taking a few bullets this week, but you stood your ground. We respect it, and
thank you.
Showing some community leadership there. So we wish everybody a good day or good evening, depending on where you are.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care.
Bye all. It was a great conversation. Thank you for facilitating, Chris.
It was my
Thanks,
pleasure.
Chris.